Hello and happy Friday, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on WJ Live. We got, well, I'm christening the young guns here today. I'm Abby Liebing. I'm a reporter here at the Western Journal, and we're joined today by Grant Atkinson, also a fellow reporter with me, and the wonderful assignment editor, Tara. And so we have a lot to cover today because there's a lot going on. Particularly, we got the Olympics going on now. We've got Putin still pushing the boundaries. We've got all sorts of good stuff. But we want to start off today with the soccer player Megan Rapinoe, who has not been included on the U.S. women's national team for the She Believes Cup. Yes, that is the real name of it, believe it or not. And she's making some, she's not happy about it. Grant, tell us a little bit about what's going on with good old Megan.
Yeah, so a lot of the stars that have been on the team for the past few years for that World Cup run did not make the team this year for the She Believes Cup, at least. Megan Rapinoe, like you said, is not on. Alex Morgan was also left off. So there's like some names that you've probably heard that aren't on there. And I think, you know, it could be that people are reading into it a little bit too much because, like you said, it's a She Believes Cup. If you haven't heard of that, it's because nobody knows what it is, and it's like a fake tournament. But it is interesting just given Megan Rapinoe's age because she's 36 years old. By the next World Cup, which is in 2023 for the women, she'll be 38, which would be the oldest woman ever to play in a World Cup, I believe, was 40. So, it could happen. She could make the roster, but she's pushing it age-wise, and it seems like her career is kind of coming towards a close, which is, we have to admit that she did a lot for women's soccer, but I think it'll be nice to see, be able to watch a women's soccer game and not have somebody out there who has outwardly expressed their hate for America. It'll be refreshing to see new faces who they may feel the same way as her, but at least they haven't come out and said America's the worst and it's racist and I hate it,
Right. So she has for those of you who don't know, she has a past with, she protested the national anthem. She's made a lot of comments about how America was not founded on freedom, but on chattel slavery. She has been pretty critical of America as a whole, but then as soon as she doesn't make it onto the national team, she's boo-hooing about it.
Yeah, it was interesting too because I saw a lot of people, I didn't see if she made a specific response, but I saw a lot of people tweeting, how dare they leave them off the team? It's so not fair. They've done so much for American soccer. How can you not put them on the team? This is a sport and it's a national team. Things change. People get older.
Yeah. People get older.
Tom
Brady retires.
Yeah. That's a good point. We've seen that in football. A lot of the quarterbacks who, we probably watched growing up and knew they're retiring. That's what happens in sports. And so sometimes the era sort of ends and you have new players. I don't think that it necessarily means it's an indictment on Megan Rapinoe or the coach hates her or whatever. She's just getting older and there are younger players coming up through the system. So I don't know why she would be so upset about that. But
yeah, and it's concerning because the manager of the U.S. women's soccer team, manager Andonovsky, he made the point. He was like, we've had some great stars, but they're getting older and we're giving a chance for, the younger people to come up, who are kind of the next generation of soccer. But Tara, what do you think about all of this politicization of sports? Because he's absolutely right. Just objectively, you can't, having 30-year-olds play is not as great as putting a 23-year-old on the field, but it's just politically charged now.
Well, when I think about the politicization of soccer just overall, it's really, really disappointing because I actually played soccer for 13 years and played all through elementary and all the way through high school and actually ended up playing in college for at least a year. But I do remember, at least growing up, I used to really look up to Hope Solo, at least for just how great of a goalie she was because she played goalkeeper and she was kind of infamous for just how great she was at that. She had some kind of shady allegations made about potential abuse with her husband and things like that. And that was devastating and that was sad, but it's okay, I was able to kind of be well, she was a great goalkeeper, but it did tarnish things. And I think at least when I was younger. I think I was about like 13 or 14 when they started getting so hyper political.
Yeah.
And I just remember kind of being disappointed. And it wasn't because I was a political expert, but it was just kind of like disheartening because it took away from the sport itself and it took away from what the women had worked so hard to do. And, you know, we always talk about, oh, the women's sports wanting to catch up to men's and whatever. And it's like for at least a few years, like I felt like women's soccer really got kind of big in the United States because they really started making straight.
It had its
and
moment.
they started to like win and do really well. And I feel like their politics really started to overshadow the actual great like sportsmanship that the women's national team had. And so it was just really disappointing, I think, growing up because I kind of was going alongside the era of no longer having just sports heroes, but having these political commentators who never were going into politics and never should have been in politics.
Yeah, I agree
Right.
with that. I think, you know, I remember watching the 2015 Women's World Cup and rooting for the United States. Then once the 2019 one rolled around, I vividly remember it was, you know, all these political activists had come out on the team and people had talked about how they really didn't like the country. It made it a lot harder to watch. It was a lot easier to support a team in 2015 full of Americans who are successful and doing well on the world stage. When they start coming out and saying, I hate America, that makes it a lot harder to root for them. And I think this is kind of a theme around sports that we're seeing lately is when you politicize things, then that starts to apply to everything. For example, Colin Kaepernick is not playing anymore.
Right.
Brian Flores, he was the coach of the Dolphins.
Yep.
He's filing a lawsuit against the NFL. And they're all saying it's because of racism. It could be, or it could be because people don't think that you're going to be successful. And so they
Exactly.
put somebody else on the field. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be racism. And I think when you politicize everything, then just normal sports things that happen somehow seem political and they're really not.
Exactly. You know, there's kind of a loss of categories of, you know, people, at the end of the day, most people want sports to just be sports and not politics. And there's no better example of that than the current Olympics. The Olympics are going on right now, believe it or not, the Winter Olympics in Beijing. And the athletic part of the Olympics has been almost entirely overshadowed at this point because it has turned into a political playground for international geopolitics. We have Western nations boycotting it because of Chinese human rights abuses. We have Putin teaming up with Xi Jinping, the president of China. So it is a politically rife situation. Exactly what we were talking about with Megan Rapinoe of just the complete convergence of politics and sports. And on top of that, also sprinkle in COVID. We've got every international problem happening at the Olympics right now. So Grant, tell us a little bit. There's been some reporting on the Olympic Village in particular and some of the weird things that are being seen there by athletes.
Yeah, there was a report that came out in Reuters of a journalist who was there. I don't know if he's in the Olympic Village. He's in a hotel where like journalists and volunteers are staying. I'm not sure if it's like technically inside, but the pictures he showed are reportedly kind of the same thing that everyone's seeing all around the Olympic sort of area there in Beijing. And it's pretty dystopian looking, honestly. There's these bartenders who are wearing hazmat suits, and he sent videos and pictures of this to Twitter. They're wearing hazmat suits while they make drinks. There was another video of this like creepy tree looking robot thing that was coming towards him spraying disinfectant spray everywhere.
Right.
It looks like something that came from a creepy novel. It doesn't look like the Olympics. It doesn't look like real life, but it certainly doesn't look like the Olympics, which is supposed to be like a global celebration where everyone's happy and all the countries come together to compete. Like, it's always been a happy thing up until last year, I would say. And then this year, there have been issues before, obviously, but these last two COVID kind of tarnished Olympics have really been just interesting to see. And it's a little bit discouraging. Right.
Tara, why do you think, you know, the Olympics has always been the symbol of, you know, okay, everybody put your politics and your wars aside for a quick minute. We're going to have 2 weeks where we all just compete. And yes, there are lots of corruptions around the Olympics, always have been. But it seems like there's just a complete blatant ignoring of that. Why do you think that people just refuse to get past this? And do you think they should? Do you think there should be things that are just ignored for the sake of the Olympics?
I mean, honestly, I think I can't be a hypocrite because I think that there are certain things where it would probably be good to stand up. So, well, as much as I hate the petty little drama politics, I don't think it's the time to go, especially for U.S. like soccer players or any people on the U.S. team. I think it's a lot different when you're leaving the best country in the world and going to the Olympics, like the Olympic stage where every other country is supposed to look up to us. And then you're just complaining about living in America when there's people literally dying to get into America every day. To me, that's a lot different than being, oh my gosh, like China has Uyghur Muslims in basically concentration camps and no one's talking about it. And we're all just going to go there and pretend like it's not happening. You know,
right.
That's a lot different statement to me than some piddly random little US matter. And so I think that there is a time and a place for that. But I do think that people should be evaluating what we make the Olympics about, because I think if it's something that's more U.S. based, like if you're going to, for example, I'll just throw this out there, like if you were to go to the Olympics and complain about abortion rights and Roe v. Wade, it would just be kind of like, why are you talking about that at the Olympics? That's
right.
like a predominantly U.S. issue, whereas like the Chinese Communist Party having open concentration camps is obviously very, very different.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between what Megan Rapinoe was doing, like we were just talking about, saying that she doesn't think the flag represents all Americans and she doesn't think America was founded on freedom. That's different than criticizing, China for having a literal genocide happening. I think that there's a difference. I don't think it's hypocritical to say I don't think it's the time and place to talk about specific American issues, but at the same time, I do think it's a time and place to not give a voice to a communist country like China. I think both those things can be true at once.
Yeah, that's very true.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, do you guys agree that the U.S. has diplomatically boycotted the Beijing Olympics? So no political officials, such as President Biden or anyone else, is in Beijing, but athletes still went. And there's been a lot of mixed signals on this because, politicians are saying, bad China, stop with the humanitarian oppression. But then at the same time, Nancy Pelosi this week, after saying how bad China is, she also specifically addressed U.S. athletes saying, I would say to our athletes, you're there to compete. Do not risk incurring the anger of the Chinese government because they are ruthless. And went on to warn them, go over, be careful. And make sure that you don't anger the Chinese. Play nice with the Chinese. What?
Yeah.
Blatant hypocrisy, which begs the question, should the U.S. even be at the Olympics at all?
Well, if you can't even send people over there and are telling them to be quiet, I just think that's rich coming from Nancy Pelosi,
right.
Considering that she's I'm going to kneel on the Senate floor for BLM and we're going to support the voices of the marginalized and the oppressed and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's one thing to be like, oh, be careful, but it's a whole other thing when you're saying blatantly, oh, don't say anything. You don't want to mess with communist China. It's like, why are we sending U.S. citizens then to a potentially dangerous situation?
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense to me, and I think it's just disheartening.
Absolutely.
I'm honestly kind of split on the question of whether we should have allowed athletes to go. As a country, obviously we have the right to diplomatically boycott, which we did. I don't know that it's really within the U.S.'s rights to say, if you're an athlete, we're not going to allow you to go. I mean, I guess they could do that. I don't know if I would support something like that. It seems like it should be the athlete's choice. If they want to go do that, then that's great. But at the same time, I think it's ridiculous still for Nancy Pelosi to say that they can't be making any comments. I don't think that, as bad as China is, they're not going to snipe a U.S. person in the middle of the Olympics. They're not going to do. I doubt that they would do anything like that during the Olympics.
Yeah, they just get dragged off to the gulag after their
yeah,
performance.
That's true. I think, though, that the United States athletes can choose where they want to go, and they can choose for themselves whether they want to speak out against China and whether that's a risk they want to take. But I don't think they need advice from Nancy Pelosi on what to talk about and not talk about.
Right. Well, do you guys think that there's kind of a middle ground that the athletes could have taken? For instance, Russia actually got banned officially from the Olympics. So their athletes are still there, but they're not allowed to compete under the Russian flag or for the nation of Russia. Do you think that there's some sort of wiggle room that, like Grant says, athletes can be able to make their own individual choices, but also it's really backing up the idea that we do not condone what's going on in China, and we're going to make a stronger statement about it? Or do you think it's just we're caught in the middle?
I honestly don't have enough information to give a solid opinion on the Russia thing, so I'm just not even going to pretend. So
it's honestly kind of difficult. I think it's a little bit murky, kind of a gray area, because if they had said, we're not going to send the United States team, you can go if you want, but we're not going to be like the United States there.
Right.
I feel like they would have gotten quite a lot of backlash for that too, because all these athletes who want to participate would have said, this is ridiculous. Why are you not letting us go? I mean, that happened in the NHL. The NHL players were supposed to go to the Olympics. They canceled it because of COVID. They say, I don't know if it had anything to do with communist China or what, but mostly because of COVID cases, they said, we're changing our minds. We're not going to allow the NHL players to go to the Olympics. And a lot of them were really, really mad. Like, they were like, we wanted to go to the Olympics and you're not letting us. So I don't know. I feel like you get into some really dicey territory if you say that we're not going to allow athletes to go. The possibility of them competing under a different name that's not the United States is interesting. I mean, I'm not sure if that would satisfy them or not. It's an interesting question for sure.
Right. It's the Olympics, just everything right now is just in murky gray waters, it seems.
Yeah.
And everyone is trying to play kind of both sides of the issue. Of almost all political issues right now being brought to light at the Olympics. We have everyone from Nancy Pelosi, our athletes, our diplomats. We now have NBC who's covering the Olympics. Per usual, NBC normally covers the Olympics, but they made these odd comments during the opening ceremonies of, oh, well, we recognize that these Western countries are boycotting the Olympics over humanitarian issues. But let's also remember that China is the champion of the developing world.
Oh
and
my gosh.
And it's helping third world countries in Latin America and in Africa. And so it's just this continual bold face, just like we're gonna say both things. We're gonna condone everyone on every side everywhere. How is that helping at all?
Yeah. I just think it's laughable. I think it's actually, I take that back. It's actually embarrassing that our American media people are promoting this stuff, because it's like, I can think back to basic intro level journalism classes where we were taught about propaganda, and it's like how to spot propaganda, like looking at this, like typical things. And then it's like, oh, here's this. We just got this. We got this press release from the Communist Party, and China's great and wonderful. And here's the Winter Olympics. Like, that's basically what NBC does. And it's like, you're not questioning that at all. I don't know.
Just zero integrity.
Yeah.
Zero integrity.
Yeah, I think the comment that got to me the most was, I guess it was yesterday the opening ceremony was broadcast. I think it was yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday, last night.
And
like
Savannah Guthrie's on there hosting, and the Chinese team brought out a person who supposedly has a Uyghur background. I don't have the name right in front of me, but supposedly this person has a Uyghur background, and they brought them out to light the torch, which is like a huge moment, obviously.
Big ceremonial moment.
And Savannah Guthrie literally was saying on the NBC broadcast, like, this is Xi Jinping providing an in-your-face moment to Western countries who have boycotted the Olympics, saying that, we're actually praising these Uyghurs. That's why we're having a Uyghur light the torch. And it's like so clearly a propaganda stunt. Just because they bring out a Uyghur person to light the torch doesn't mean that they're not committing genocide over there at the same time. And it's pretty much universally accepted that they are committing genocide. And that's not going to be changed.
There's strong evidence,
It's not going to be changed by the fact that they bring out a Uyghur to light the torch. I think that it's just so clear. China says we don't want to politicize the Olympics. We want to just make it a competition. We want everyone to have fun, blah, 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 blah. It's not true, because they're bringing out
Absolutely
a Uyghur
false.
person to light the torch in an effort to get the spotlight off of their own genocide. I mean, that's political on its face.
Well,
exactly.
And you know what it reminds me of? Just because, as you said, we're the young guns of the Western Journal, so you guys are going to get this. But it reminds me of in the Hunger Games when they all go to the Capitol to do the Hunger Games and it's all dressed up and nice. And then everyone in the surrounding districts is starving. Like, I guarantee that's like the exact same thing that's going on in China right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think we
just
can all
complete
imagine.
desolation surrounding the Olympic Village.
It's just, it looks great in Beijing. Everyone else in China is not doing so well.
Yeah, they want to put this polished, pretty picture up and make people think that this is what China looks like. They do that in America too. I mean, I wrote a story a few days ago about the Washington Wizards having a China night where they like celebrated Chinese heritage and stuff. They only want to present the good parts of China. They don't want to talk about the sketchy parts that are supposed to just kind of be over there in the dark that nobody knows about. But we do know about them.
But we do know about them. And it's not, you're not really hiding them. And then, China has the audacity to put the shiny face on things and try in some ways to, slap the Western powers in the face for boycotting. Meanwhile, in the back room, just hours before the opening ceremony, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin from Russia, who is currently in his own debacle with the Western powers, are shaking hands and releasing statements about how they're, the best of friends and they're going to oppose the Western powers. And they're not going to let anybody mess with them, basically.
Yeah.
And so China's doing the continual two-faced tactics that it loves. And so let's switch a little bit. Let's talk now about Putin, because all the Western diplomats are not at the Olympics. Vladimir Putin is, even though he's on the verge of starting a war in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And he was very blatant about disrespecting the Ukrainians at the Olympics. Tara, tell us a little bit about that, because it's pretty funny, but awful.
It's like the most middle school girl kind of jab you could possibly think of. So the Ukrainians were walking out and doing their big introduction, where everyone walks out in the matching snowsuits and is like, oh, smiling, waving. And as soon as Ukraine walks out, Vladimir Putin decides to just fall asleep suddenly. Something overcame him and he decided to pretend to fall asleep, it looked like. So it was just like this huge jab at Ukraine, and it's just, it's literally right after they had talked and went there. And I think it's just so funny that Vladimir Putin and the president of China are sitting there making BFF bracelets while the rest of the world avoids the entire games.
Exactly. Grant, do you think that we should be worried about this friendship that continues to grow with Russia and China that is now just being cemented literally in front of the whole world at the Olympics?
I kind of do. I think that Putin's even just being there is kind of a statement in and of itself of, we are friends. We are not angry at China, or at least we're not angry enough to boycott the Olympics like some other countries. So clearly they have a relationship. They don't feel like that relationship has been tarnished by the Chinese genocide. Whatever they're doing to commit human rights abuses has not scared away Russia. It hasn't scared away Vladimir Putin. So I think that is certainly concerning. And I think when you think about the potential conflicts that could be coming up in in the coming days.
Right.
You have China, who potentially could invade Taiwan. You have Russia, who potentially could invade Ukraine. And I'm not saying either of those things are likely, but there's certainly things that you have to think about. And if you start getting these two countries into some sort of alliance, you have to wonder whether they're going to coordinate something, which would be disastrous for the U.S. and for the Western nations, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. So this week we saw, the continued escalation between Russia, Ukraine, NATO, U.S., Europe. Everybody's in on it now. Saw the continued escalation of that, and Biden actually deployed troops to Eastern Europe to basically be ready in case Russia does invade Ukraine. And now we have China throwing in the towel with Russia and shaking the finger at the U.S. saying, don't do that. Don't annoy Russia or you'll annoy us as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that the U.S. should be how should we be reacting to this, particularly because Biden has taken an unusually strong stance against Russia that we have not seen him take in policies before?
Man, I just don't think that. I do not think he should have sent troops right away, because I just think that in any case I've looked at where you immediately just kind of act defensively on something, it immediately kind of triggers this like response. And we already know that Putin's willing to show how strong Russia is, and kind of just show his strength. So it doesn't surprise me if Putin's like, I wasn't going to do anything. I was just testing the waters. But now that America's there, that really makes me mad. So now I'm just going to go gung-ho for it. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Putin just retaliates even further, or if it just kind of expedites whatever process Putin was working towards then. And I think it also just puts us in a really difficult position with our European allies. I mean, they just lifted COVID restrictions over there.
Right.
So things have been really strained for the past year because no one really knew what was going on with COVID. And now it's like, oh, are we going to all join together? What's going on? Like, it's so weird. Like, I don't know. I have to stop making my little middle school jokes about China and Russia together in the corner. But I just like, that's literally what it feels like to me. So,
I mean, yeah, a lot of it comes down to middle school alliances just on the international stage.
Yeah.
I think the problem with Joe Biden and foreign policy is the same as his problem with many other things, which is that he's just so weak and like spineless, and other countries know it. I don't think that we should, want to start a war with Russia. That doesn't sound like a good idea or something I'd want to do. And if sending troops over there is going to exacerbate tensions, then that's something obviously that you have to be careful of. At the same time, I think Biden has to do something to show that he's serious, because he's just so weak, and he was so weak in Afghanistan, and he's been so weak just on foreign policy all across the board, that he wants to say, okay, well, I have to do something to show them that I'm serious about this. I think he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because of, honestly, how bad of a president he's been. I mean, like, what can he do to show them I'm serious, but I also don't want to escalate tensions? Like, he's just so unscary that I don't know what he could do.
Well, and I feel like it's literally poking the bear. Like, you don't know for sure what it's going to do, but it's like, I just don't think it's going to end well one way or the other, because we just got our troops back from Afghanistan, and we still have hundreds of people left back there, but we just got our troops back, and optically that's what they want to say. And now it's just reverting to going back to Russia. And I'm not a foreign policy expert, but I do know there were a lot of people saying that after he pulled out of Afghanistan, that really did shake up like the Middle East and Europe and made things kind of unstable there. So I wouldn't be surprised if someone who's way more intelligent than I am can probably point to how that instability kind of led to this broader issue with Russia. But
right. Well, the hilarious thing is that after Biden took a stronger stand and poked the bear against Russia, China, by doing this little agreement at the Olympics with Putin, saying that they'd, be on their side, basically neutered President Biden, because now his only two options are to literally start war. His idea of economic sanctions against Russia are now worthless.
They don't care.
They
about
wouldn't care
sanctions
in the first place, and now China is like, oh, if the U.S. sanctions you, we got you.
Yeah,
no problems. We'll support you in that. So poor Biden. Sometimes I almost feel a little bad for him that just. Sometimes he tries, but he just can't get anything right. Yeah. It continues to come back on him time and time again.
I don't even feel bad for him. I feel bad for America.
Yeah.
Because I think we're seeing the repercussions of what happens when a lot of people just vote based on feelings and no more mean tweets. And now you're seeing the real life implications on a strategy front, because no one can tell me that Trump had as significant international relations issues as Joe Biden has. Like, we're seeing the implications now. And so it's like, it's your people who you put in as advisors. They're clearly not doing anything. You're clearly not being successful. You have people leaving the administration. You have 3 diplomats leaving for the Iran deal. Now you have Kamala Harris, speechwriter, leaving after other people have fled. So it's just an utter disaster. And so, I don't know. It's disgusting.
I mean, Trump wasn't a great foreign policy president. He wasn't like an expert, but he wasn't on the brink of starting a war with anyone. I mean, probably one of the biggest criticisms that I can remember of foreign policy during his tenure is when he met with Kim Jong-un, which, I mean, okay, he met with him. Like, people got mad about the optics of it. But like, they weren't about to attack us, or they weren't about to invade someone. Yeah. So I mean, I think he at least was able to keep it to the level where we weren't on the brink of war. And I don't think we're quite on the brink of war right now, but it's starting to heat up pretty quickly. And it's a little concerning when you think about it.
Right. You know, the bar for foreign policy is pretty low when you really look at the grand scheme of things of just, you know, just don't get into a war during your presidency and make sure that a minimal amount of Americans die overseas.
Yeah.
And so far, that is not Biden's strong suit.
It's like Biden's on the first level of limbo and is like bonking his head. Like,
it's just, he just can't do anything right. And it's just, I think it's really adding, as we've seen, you know, we've brought up again and again throughout the Olympics and all the policies that are surrounding it and everything down to sports. Everything has become very, you know, you see the two sides of the issue and everybody tries to hopscotch on both sides of it. Mm-hmm. And there's no one's landing on either side of, you know, we should do this or we shouldn't do this. It's like, well, maybe we can do a little bit of both.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, that's true.
And there's no clear idea of just taking a strong stand against anyone or for anything. So it's just another weekday for poor old America and poor old Joe Biden.
We just look pathetic again.
We do, and it's unfortunate that we're looking pathetic now in the middle of the Olympics because, you know, normally we can make a pretty good show on the athletic front, but now the politics are overshadowing it.
Yeah. Maybe we'll win the most gold medals and then everything will just be fine.
Maybe it'll just be perfect right after that. Maybe we'll come back strong and we'll, you know, make sports great again.
That's a good one.
And we'll try our best, but no promises. All right. Well, we are just about out of time. So I want to thank you all for joining us here at WJ Live. It's been another fun Friday talking about all these issues. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on YouTube and Rumble as well. And also make sure to click that little, what is it, bell? Yeah, a little bell icon.
I don't know what it is on Rumble, but I'm sure it's similar.
The Rumbler. Click that.
Some sort of little icon that'll let you know when we go live. And we go live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific time and 5 p.m. I'm switching up my time zones all of a sudden. 5 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure to join us for those. And also, please feel free to support us here at the Western Journal so that we can keep doing things like that. We can keep bringing you good news and talking about these important issues. So make sure to subscribe and follow us and help the good work that we do at westernjournal.com/join. It's been a pleasure here again on Friday, and we will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.